Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Blues Hub post-game show. I am your host, Brooke Grimsley, alongside Jacob Stanoch, voice of Lindenwood Hockey. Jacob, thank you so much for joining us. This is really exciting because this is my first time hosting this Blues Hub post-game show, so it's really exciting. And also, you have a Blues win tonight, 3-1, the final in this one against the Avs. Jacob, a lot to dive into with this one, but I just want to start with that first period, the physicality that they were able to really set the tone with the Blues in that one, especially what Walker was able to do.
Yeah, that was something that Jim Montgomery, I think, really wanted to focus on because the Avalanche, they're a fast team. And, all the way from McKinnon down to Makar, it's going to be – they're an incredibly fast team. So how do you wear that down? You wear them down physically. And, I mean, Walker showed it immediately. You get the fight very earlier on in the game. Then you get that big reverse hit as well. And then he just continues on with that pushing and shoving around the net, trying to get into their heads. I mean, that's textbook Nathan Walker hockey and physical hockey. And I mean, you just love to see that, especially after last night's game. It was a tough game where in all honesty, this was a game that looked very similar to that Edmonton Oilers game right before the break. So the response tonight with arguably one of their best games since probably the Calgary series here at home. It's fantastic to see from the Blues and what they did physically, defensively as well, getting in front of Benner, who had that tough goal go in first and then responded well with another great game.
By the way, for all the people who are tuning in right now, make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also follow us on social media and be sure to interact with us so you can follow along for all these updates on post-game shows and our weekly show, which is coming up here soon. So make sure you stick around for that. But I want to go back to Walker for a second because, look, he's a little guy. Are you ever surprised by sometimes the physicality that he's able to display out there?
Oh, God, no. I have had a history of playing with some quote unquote shorter players, and they are always the most physical because they are always kind of the most picked on. And what Nathan Walker brings to the table, it's what we've seen since, I mean, heck, before we even came to the Blues. He has just been such a physical player and just, I don't know if you can really say a bulldog, maybe more of a Chihuahua kind of player, but what he does on the ice is just, I love that style of play. It's the definition of a gritty fourth liner, but also on top of that, a role player who can just get so physical and get underneath so many players' skins during the game. And that's another thing because the Blues they love playing those lower lines. So having that in there as well it's phenomenal for them. And his play, it's something that ever since he came to the Blues, I was so happy when they said that he was coming over because that was a big, big pickup for that style of play that we have seen him play historically.
I like what you said about Chihuahua. Yeah, I mean, maybe little, but his bite is pretty ferocious. And then you take that into the second period that we will see for the Blues. 3 goals in that second period, that physicality carrying over. You had Braden Shin, who got a much-needed goal. That broke, I believe, like a 9-game goalless streak for him. You had Colton Parayko with a goal and also with Holloway. What was your big takeaway from that second period that allowed them to get those grade A chances that actually worked out for them?
I just think the biggest thing is I think you could kind of tell that they wore him down just a little bit. They kind of outplayed him in that second period. And then you also can tell it just that little bit of wear and tear. That's where you get those goals in front of the net. All 3 goals coming very close to the net. Obviously, Shen picking up that rebound. And then you get Parayko prying away at that loose puck and Holloway with that tip in with 10 seconds left. And that's just something that you love to see. And obviously, first period, it seemed a little rough. There's a couple of tough plays, but obviously the physicality was the biggest part of that first period. And then transitioning that to that second period where you had that offensive explosion, the movement of the puck seemed a little bit smoother. They were more focused trying to get it in the offensive zone, and it really rewarded for the Blues. And certainly Holloway getting that last goal in the last 10 seconds of the second, that is as big as it gets. I've always said you get a goal in that last minute, you can almost demoralize the team for an entire game. It doesn't matter when it comes. So especially at the end of that second period, it was going to be tough for the Avalanche coming into the third, to say the least.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to touch on Braden Shin, especially with him being the captain. We know that he's kind of had a little bit of rush stretch there with the goals, like a 9-game goalless streak. As I mentioned, he was able to break that. How big is that for him, especially as we're getting closer and closer to that March trade deadline?
I mean, it's big for him. I've always been a supporter of Shen, especially as a captain, because I think what people always expect from forwards, especially second line forwards, or top 6 forwards, is they always expect him to be big goal scorers, big offensive playmakers, put up a bunch of numbers. Schenn doesn't really do that, but he is such a really complete player. Kind of a little bit, kind of the style of Ryan O'Reilly, but more of a physical player with Schenn. And I've obviously supported him for so long, ever since he came over to the Blues, ever since he became the captain. I've always loved his style of play because he's a gritty guy that can still make offensive plays, and that's why he's up on that second or in that top 6 lines. But the goal today, I mean, you saw it almost kind of similar to that goal back in 2019 against the Sharks in that Western Conference Final, breaking that playoff streak where he didn't score goals and broke the stick over his leg. I mean, just to see that, it's big for, obviously you get the captain scoring the goal. So that's big for the team in the first place. And to get that kind of stretch, especially that opening goal in a game like that, it's really a big showing for the team as a whole throughout that entire game, kind of showing the strategy and everything paying off for him to open up the game for them.
And for everybody who is tuning in right now, make sure you get your questions into the chat, and we'll be sure to answer those through the rest of the show today. We actually have one from Ryan Mack. Hey, Ryan, for watching. He's watching right now, and he said, Bitter on fire feels like a pivoting moment for our season with him clutching the Four Nations tournament. Yeah, I think everybody is still just absolutely just amazed by that performance by Bitter in the Four Nations tournament, especially in that championship, the way he was able to hold it down in overtime. I mean, we mentioned it on the Randy Carricker show this past week, but I think a lot of people owe Jordan Binnington an apology. So he carries that momentum into this game tonight. Obviously, he had the game off last night. What did you see from Binnington tonight?
I think I just saw kind of the textbook Binnington that we see pretty much every other game. I mean, his numbers don't show him, or don't show really the success that he's had this season. I was at the Blues Oilers game right before the Four Nations break, and it was one of his best games of the season. Yeah, he let up 3 goals, but he still played an incredible incredible game. And you know, you get that 897, it just kind of hovers over your head, not having that over 900 save percentage. But what he's played so far this season, I think that truly showed, especially when you have the amount of players in front of you that you do when you have international tournaments. It truly showed in the Four Nations. And I think that's just, it's going to give him more fuel throughout this entire season. I really think it did, because obviously there's a big thing of, oh, we all owe the apologies to Jordan Binnington now. And I've been saying that since he's been having some rough stretches. But again, like most of this Blues player, I have had so much belief in Binnington. He's a fantastic goaltender. I really do. And now that he's really kind of developing and maturing as a player, you're seeing it more and more these past couple of seasons. And this season, he's having one of his best, despite what the numbers say. And again, what he did in the Four Nations tournament is just going to propel his image in terms of his ability. And I think also the rest of the season, just the one downside is just the Blues defense really hasn't kind of been showing in front of him. And that's why his numbers haven't been as great as you'd like to see him, but stats don't always tell the story.
Yeah. Well, for tonight, at least in this game, I thought that it was a pretty good game for the Blues defensively. 3-1, the final score, with the Blues getting a win over the Avs, especially the block shots. What stood out to you with the Blues defensively and what they were able to do? And when you're talking about block shots, the way that these players are willing to use their body, that's something that Berube would always talk about. And I think it's a big part of Montgomery's game too, that he's trying to get out of these guys.
Yeah, that has been something that about the Blues that I've always loved, the ability that they have to sacrifice the body. And tonight it really showed. They get 4 block shots in that last 2 minutes of the game with the empty net pulled for Colorado. And honestly, they give up I believe it was 3 shots on goal in that last minute or so. But it could have been upwards of 10 if they don't get the body out in front. And again, kind of going back to that Calgary series, we saw that when they were fighting for a playoff spot. But tonight, you really see that being big for a team when you're a handful of points out of that playoff spot. You know, it kind of feels like maybe you're not fighting for much, or you're just kind of going out trying to maybe put yourself back in contention. But to see that where they're at right now, knowing that they've had some rough breaks coming right out of a really tough game against Winnipeg last night, the block shots, I mean, it's just, that really shows what the guys mean, or what it means to them to try and get that win here tonight.
What else stood out to you about tonight's game and tonight's win?
I think the biggest thing is just kind of that response of knowing that Colorado's not a bad team. They hold that top wild card spot right now in the West. And obviously you get that rough game against Winnipeg, and looking at that game against Winnipeg, it was another game where they had an ability to close out against a good team, but they couldn't get the job done. And they really had a couple of misplays, couple of kind of dumb turnovers, and kind of some of the Blues play that we've seen in the ups and downs so far this season. But I guess just the response tonight for me was the biggest aspect of it. And knowing the team that they're playing, especially knowing the ability that they had coming off of that game against the Predators last night for them, knowing that they were going to have that same kind of attitude coming in tonight. I mean, it's great to see that as a fan, looking at the team, knowing that they have that ability to want to respond and want to have that better ability coming back, knowing that they have back-to-back games, but still willing to fight and put their all into a Sunday afternoon game.
Yeah, and even with that loss last night, I mean, the Jets are a really good team, and the fact that they were able to go toe-to-toe with them really says a lot. And you look at the games this week, too. You have the Kraken coming up next on Tuesday. You have the trade deadline that's just really looming over the Blues right now, and I know that we're going to talk about this on Blues Hub Weekly, but I want to get your take, Jacob, on just what is kind of left for the Blues and what they're trying to accomplish leading up to this trade deadline. What do you think that Jim Montgomery, Doug Armstrong, and Alexander Steen need to see from this group, or do you think that some of those decisions are already made about the trade deadline?
I think right now they've just been so up and down, it's kind of hard to tell. That's something I've been saying pretty much since November, is that they're consistently inconsistent. So coming up to even the trade deadline right now, it's kind of hard to tell what pieces are we really missing. Like, because tonight defense had an excellent game. So are we missing pieces in the defense, or do we need pieces in the offense? But the offense also produced tonight. But there was also struggles last night, but there was also some good showings before the break. So what is it that they need? What is the difference that they need? So to me, it's just kind of like what sticks out. And to me, it's night by night that maybe something sticks out, but something else doesn't. So player wise, I don't really know if there's anyone. I know there's some names floating around, but to me, I don't see why. I don't really see anyone really raring to go. I don't think there's anyone that Doug Armstrong just sitting on and just like, yeah, we're ready to try and upgrade from this winger or this center or this defenseman or whatever. Because I mean, they're still a relatively deep team. So in terms of the trade deadline, I honestly don't really know, because it's been so up and down of what we need or what we don't need. And the conversation about that floating around has just been all over the place. So I couldn't really even tell.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of especially surprises with this team right now. You mentioned it just being consistently inconsistent. I mean, I think that's like a good way to put it with the Blues this season, is that there was expectations, then the expectations go away. You get Buchnevich signed, and then his play kind of teetered down a little bit after that. And then Robert Thomas, I know he's been dealing with an ankle injury. His play has kind of been here or there. And then you had a great game from Thomas and Buchnevich yesterday. Mm-hmm. But I think that one of my good surprises is some of these younger players stepping up that I wasn't exactly expecting. I didn't know. And we talked about Holloway with his goal tonight, his 17th of the season, by the way. I wasn't expecting Holloway to take on this big of a role going into the season, especially right now.
Yeah, and I think it just kind of goes with Holloway's play so far this season. He really has just kind of stepped up. We've seen that from a lot of Blues players historically as well. That's just kind of also a trend in the NHL. You get traded or you sign with a new team and you start off hot. I think the one difference, though, is Holloway's continued that, past that December break. He's had a pretty good stretch where even if he's not putting up points, he's still playing some pretty good hockey. And I think it's very deserving what he has with his role, even though it's very, very high. But also kind of going back on some of those young guys, Kyrou, Thomas, and what they have done I've always had high hopes for them. They started off strong, had some rough breaks, but this season again, like you said, they're stepping up big and they've had some big impacts. And you can kind of see it too, where the young guys are slowly starting to come together even more too. They're playing more as a team. You're seeing that in the plays they make. You're seeing that in the opportunities they create. And that's something personally, that's what I love to see, is a team that can also start just kind of start melding together, and maybe not putting up, one guy gets a bunch of numbers, or this couple of guys don't have high numbers, but they all have even numbers, which means they're putting up evenly. And that's what I personally love to see from a line full of young guys, or even just a couple.
Jacob, it was great having you on. Thank you so much for joining us. And Jacob Stanoch. Now, look, for the people who are tuning in, this is actually the first time I'm meeting Jacob, really, and and that's a very interesting way to meet someone, right? Is when you do a podcast for the first time together. We haven't been able to meet in person just yet, so I had to make sure that I got your name right, and hopefully I did at the beginning, and hopefully I did here at the end.
Yeah. It's a hard one to get, but I've had some bad ones, had some good ones, but it was right this time. So
perfect. All right, that is Jacob Stanoch, and he is the Lindenwood voice for hockey. Thank you so much for joining us, Jacob. And make sure, everybody, if you're here right now, stick around, because we do have our Blues Hub Weekly post-game show coming up. And by the way, Blues Hub Post, which we just did, is presented by Hot Shots, St. Louis's home for all the games, all the time since 1990. Find yours at hotshotsnet.com, and stick around, as I mentioned, because now it's time for Blues Hub Weekly, which is coming up after this quick message. All the games, all the time, let's go Blues! Now it's time for Blues Hub Weekly. Thank you, everyone, for sticking around. And we will now welcome in, and by the way, I am Brooke Grimsley, and we're welcoming in Blues forward and Stanley Cup champion Jamal Mayers. And we have Meyer, Blues writer, who is a part of our Blues coverage here at Sports Hub STL. Thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. A lot to talk about, because we just came off a huge Blues win, 3-1 against the Colorado Avalanche here over at Enterprise Center. What an exciting one, guys. Jamal, I'm just going to start with you. Your reaction to that game and that performance?
Well, I was most impressed with the pace that the Blues were able to play with. And listen, that's been a challenge for this group in the last several years. And I think Doug Armstrong is trying to do a great job of injecting some speed into the lineup. But the way that they were able to play with pace, and a team in the Colorado Avalanche that arguably hasn't got off to a great start, but does play with a ton of speed, has some elite talent and players in their lineup. The Blues, I felt, took control of this game, especially in that second period, and found a way to outplay a really good Avs team. Even when they tried to push back in the third, they were up to the challenge. So a real impressive win. And, I love the team speed and the fact that they were playing fast.
And Mike, I have to get your impression about this too, that physicality that we saw in that first period. And as Jamal was just talking about there, I like the energy from this group right now in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And a guy like, I think one of the shortest, if not the shortest guy who's on the team, Nathan Walker, coming in clutch here for this squad, just letting the crowd just get up and going, especially on kids' night. Let those kids just use those vocal cords to be able to just give them the hometown advantage. I love the physicality that this team here is bringing, and especially as Jacob here mentioned here earlier, in a consistently inconsistent squad, you need to be able to start riding the ship, and physicality is one way that you can be able to do that.
Jamal, I have to get your reaction to that too, because as a former player, I have to imagine that you like to see a player like Nathan Walker, who maybe doesn't have the most minutes on the ice, but you can definitely feel his impact out there, especially with his physical presence.
Yeah, he certainly understands his role. Energy guy, knows how to get on the forecheck and change and maintain that momentum. And I think for a lot of guys trying to find their niche and figure out how they're going to fit in and provide value, I think he really understands that I'm going to do that with my skating. I'm going to do that with my tenacious play. I'm going to do that with my checking and my physicality. He's been able to affect the game in so many different ways, but I think that staying true to who he is as a player has been very crucial for him. And it seems like every single night he's in the lineup, that's what you're going to get. And I think that, that energy is contagious, particularly on, it might seem like when you get on a schedule and you're playing afternoon games, it's a little bit difficult to get up for those games. So, third and fourth line guys can't have nights off. And he's a guy who certainly brings it every single night. And he understands those moments within a game, understands that, hey, I'm going to have to bring extra energy coming out of the break on a back-to-back. How can I affect the game in different ways with limited ice?
And you can also, if you are tuning in right now to watch us here on YouTube, make sure that you enjoy and also like and subscribe on YouTube, but also join in on the YouTube chat. And we'll be sure to answer some of your questions. You see right here, First Person Duders said, love this. And that's fantastic. We want to get a lot of comments like that. But if you have any questions, please let us know. Now, going into the second period, I just want to talk about those 3 goals in the second period that we saw from Braden Shin, breaking that 9-game scoreless streak for him where he wasn't able to score. And then you also had Dylan Holloway. You also had Colton Parayko with the goal. But especially for Shin or Jamal, how big was that for him to break through in that one?
Yeah, and you know what's funny is earlier, his shift before that, he had a fantastic opportunity where he hit the post. He came with so close to scoring, and I think that you didn't see any frustration. I think it's important for veteran players, the captain especially, to show the composure in those moments because everybody's watching. You don't think they're watching. Everybody's watching how you're going to react. And right after that, as we talked about earlier, the pace that they were playing with, he gets rewarded coming off the bench and ends up being in the right spot at the right time and makes no mistakes. So happy for him and his ability to cash in. It's been a long time, but that happens. It's sometimes it takes a while, but when you're not getting those opportunities, that's when you get concerned. The fact that he was getting chances even within the same game, in fact, the shift prior, probably have it even a better chance, and he was able to cash in. So it's nice to get him on the board.
Mike, what did you see from that second period with those 3 goals?
I think it was exactly what the doctor ordered here for a lot of those guys. You were mentioning here about Dylan Holloway. He's cooled off here a bit. It's a bit of a stretch having that 2-week break, but 6-game goalless streak here before tonight, that was huge here for him. Shen, another goalless streak that he was able to snap in. So, you need your top guys to start producing. You need them here at the front of the line. They're the guys who are going to look at the rest of their squad and say, hey, come on, be able to join me. And this is what you need here from those guys. So I absolutely loved everything that I saw. Loved the effort, and just want to be able to keep just being consistent here with it. Just take it period by period.
And you think about what Falk brought to the table too, just jumping up late in the period. When I think Colorado basically stopped playing, and good thing on him. He kept playing, got that puck in the corner, and got to the front of the net as quickly as possible, and ends up in the back of the net. That is a massive goal in the right moment. So you think about that, how they're able to activate their D, allow their D to be a part of it. That's been probably the biggest issue. Besides Colton, offensively, there's been a lack of consistency all season long for the back end, and it's nice to see Falk be a part of that, but perhaps it hasn't been enough all season long for him.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it was a really good game for Falk. He had 2 assists in this one. For Justin Falk, as we know, we're getting a little bit closer to the trade deadline, which is just really looming for these players. What have you seen from Justin Falk just kind of coming into this, coming out of that 4 Nations break, but also into this with the trade deadline looming here?
Well, there's a lot of decisions that have to be made. And you think about it, it's nice that they got this victory, but it's tough because now they're 5 points behind Vancouver. But you have 4 teams to jump. You've got to jump the Ducks. You got to jump Utah, Calgary, and Vancouver. Like, it's not just the points. It's the fact you have to jump so many teams. So at some point, with only 23 games now remaining, you've got to decide organizationally, what are we going to do? And for me, Justin Falk is at top of that list. Yes, he has 2 years remaining at $6.5 million cap hit. You got Krug, who's also in the same boat, similar, same amount of term remaining, has injury concerns, and maybe they'll be able to get out of that contract. Who knows what's going to happen with that situation, whether he'll remain on long-term IR or he'll come back and play. And then you've got Nick Leddy, who also has 2 years remaining at $4 million. I don't see 2 of those 3 remaining on the roster. So you know what? If Falk's going to play well leading into this is the perfect time to actually go out there and see what you could get for him. And then you think on the front end, as much as we love Schenner, you know what? There's been a lot of talk around the league about what he could provide for a playoff contending type of team. I know he loves it here in St. Louis, but at some point you have to realize if we're going to retool, what are the changes and the moves that Army's going to make, that they're going to find a way to retool this group and make some changes so that, they're not just on the cusp, because it's, in my opinion, it's always tough to be 17 to 22, just outside the playoff picture. And then it comes to June, you don't get that high draft pick that you'd really like. It's almost like, okay, is this a time to take a step back? Perhaps they fall off a little bit, but maybe you get yourself in a better draft position.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because with the trade deadline, it seems like, just based off of rumors, and you're completely correct that it looks like Shin is a part of that conversation, that Doug Armstrong isn't necessarily afraid to move on from for some of these kind of older core players that you're looking at. And you have Falk, you have Krug is another one that you could look at too, and Shin as guys that they might try to move on from the trade deadline. It's really interesting because the Cardinals are going through something similar where it's like we're talking about this youth movement. It seems like the Blues are doing that in the same way. And you had a great game last night from Robert Thomas and from Pavel Buchnevich. For Robert Thomas, especially too, can you guys see him taking over as kind of maybe the leader for this group if they do move on from a Braden Shin or one of these more veteran players?
I think it's tough, especially with a guy who's like Buchnevich. As somebody who's never really played the game, Jamal, you were able to speak a little bit more here into this. It seems like Buchnevich is a little bit of a person who could be able to get inside of his own head here a little bit more, start gripping his own stick here a little bit tighter if things just aren't really going his way. I think this break really helped him out a lot, mentally speaking. And so he was able to come into this. It looked like he was just a little bit more lackadaisical. And so I don't know if, a consistency, here with him that's going to necessarily be him being a leader. I would love for that to be the case. But there's a lot of hesitancies that I have here about making him a key cog here, like within this organization.
I mean, yeah, I think that Buchnevich and Thomas, for me, fall into a similar category. They're leaders, but they're leaders in regard to their play. I think it'd probably not be a good thing to ask Thomas to do more than what he's doing. He is leading the team offensively, plays in all different situations, has improved tremendously in his faceoffs, is finding a way to become more consistent. In fact, I think it was kind of a statement for him in regard to, hey, Army, take a look. You should have picked me for Team Canada these last 2 games. And I think that if his focus is singularly on continuing to play the way he just did the last 2 games, because I thought he was dominant, that is enough. To ask him to also be a leader or the leader might be a little bit too much for him. I'm not saying he can't shoulder that load, but I think that if perhaps you did have to move on from Schenner, ends up going somewhere else to make a playoff run, it wouldn't surprise me if they just let it happen organically and let them lead by group. Let them sit back, let them figure it out on their own. There's really no rush to put extra pressure on Thomas, particularly when he's playing so well. And then maybe that's something you revisit in the summer and figure out what are we going to do to help support our leadership group.
You could really start to see. Sorry, you could really go start to see the possibility even of next season, like should Shen be moved on from, of a year without a captain. You have a bunch of A's just sitting on the ice, and you say, guys, that you're the guys who are going to choose who's going to lead this team. So that's a great point. Yeah.
And real quick, before we can kind of continue on with this trade deadline discussion, because we do have some other questions coming in too, I do want to mention just real quick the newsletter. While we have people coming in, one, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, but also once you subscribe and like this video, if you haven't already, go to sportshubscl.com and sign up for the Hub newsletter sent to your inbox twice a week. And anytime St. Louis sports news breaks, the first one comes out tomorrow. You'll be the first to know about Sports Hub St. Louis events and merchandise, get exclusive content and prize opportunities and more. While you're on the site, check out all the St. Louis sports content, including game recaps, programming highlights, sports news and opinion, gambling tips, and more. It's all on the website at sportshubstl.com. Now, I want to dive right back into this, as we have right here too. Sign up for the Sports Hub STL newsletter before noon tomorrow for a chance to win a $250 StubHub gift card. Oh, nice. If you sign up now for a chance to win and for more exclusive prizes, existing subscribers are already entered. So this is courtesy of CarShield. Thanks to CarShield for doing this. That's exciting for people who want to join our newsletter. But diving back into the trade deadline discussion, I saw somebody had mentioned Jordan Binnington, because we're going to talk about Four Nations a little bit later, and that's from, I believe, Access Rob is the best way I can interpret that username. So hopefully that's the correct way to do it. But they say, do you think they move Binnington while his value is so high right now? So we're going to touch on Four Nations a little bit later, but we discussed it earlier with Jacob. His performance in Four Nations, especially in that championship game, just amazing. Vintage Binnington that we're able to see there, especially in overtime to help seal that win for them. Is his value really high for teams right now?
Well, absolutely. I think that he's not going anywhere. He's really elevated his stock. You're absolutely right. Going into the Four Nations, all the talk was about the U.S. goaltenders and how much better the goaltending was for the U.S. group versus the Canadian group. And what I think was probably the best strategic move that John Cooper made was that he made a decision going into the tournament that his guy, based on all the, he heard the noise too, and to support Binner, real brilliant move by John Cooper to anoint Binner the goalie from the beginning. He didn't waver after the first game, stuck with them. After the second game, stuck with them. And because of that, I think it gave Binner extra confidence that, you know what, my coaching staff believes in me, Team Canada believes in me, and then he went out and performed when it mattered most. So I think that was a real smart move by the coaching staff and the leadership of Team Canada to make that decision early on, because if you had bounced back to Aiden Hill and Aiden Hill played well, there'd be this concern, oh, who do you go with in the final? There was none of that. And I think that really helped Binner settle in and go in and just play the best he could, and ends up winning because of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it would be tough, I think, to be able to move a goalie like Jordan Binnington here right now. I'm not saying that it's impossible to be able to do it, but I think contractually speaking, if it's going to end up happening, it would maybe be something like that's in the offseason that it would happen. This isn't really something that, you almost have to get your mindset away from something like an EA Sports type of thing, where their trade value may end up going up, and like now's the time to be able to sell. Like you need to be able to have two parties. You need to be able to have a starting goaltender position. You need to be able to make a lot work. And so yes, his trade value could be high, but I don't know if this happens here like before the trade deadline.
And for you guys this weekend, obviously the guys just getting back into the grind after that Four Nations tournament. Who was your players of the weekend? And Mike, I'll go ahead and start with you first.
Boy, it's hard not to be able to say Pavel Buchnevich, with 4 points. I'm sorry, 4 points here now, just within his past 2 games. But I still think, an under the radar player here for me was Alexei Toropchenko. Yesterday he throws out a ton of hits. He was looking like a man possessed who came out just very, very refreshed. And then I believe it was a season high 7 hits that he laid out. But the thing that I really loved is that he was also creating the plays. He was the guy who was strong along the boards, who was coming down, who let the pass go here for Parayko to be able to set up that season high. I think it was 104 miles an hour shot. But then he also set up the play behind the net to help Nathan Walker, who just barely missed that wide open net go to, I believe that would have tied the game here at that point. Toropchenko, I think, was just a very under the radar player for me.
Yeah, honorable mention for me would be the defense. I really liked the play of, obviously, the big man ended up playing unbelievable Parayko. But I got to go with Robert Thomas. He ends up last night, I believe, with 2-1, and only got an assist tonight, but had the puck and a stick, creating all night long, and had a tough matchup against McKinnon. I believe he went head-to-head most shifts, so not an easy matchup for him, but came out on top. And I think that anytime you can do that, you got my vote.
Now we look at this team with the games that we have coming up this weekend. We talked about the trade deadline and how that's really looming over for these players. Army has a tough decision to make, and so does Alexander Steen, who is the GM in waiting under Armstrong. But what do you think about Jim Montgomery and his approach with his players? How is he evaluating these guys going the trade deadline? And he really also is kind of looking at it, I'm sure, as a way of kind of putting together the building blocks of what he wants this team to look like in the future too, because I think we're all realistic here. I mean, playoffs seem like a long shot for these guys. And Jamal, I'll start with you.
That's a great point, Brooke. I think that's part of what happens, right? When you feel like you're out of the playoffs, and I've been in that situation a few times, you're being evaluated. Are you a part of the solution, or are you part of the problem? And it's a great place to play. So I can assure you that he has a very good sense of what he wants his players to do and how he wants them to play and how they fit in. Very cerebral guy, tactically very sharp, but also really good with people and his ability to get the most out of people. So yes, he will be evaluating. They will be evaluating who is going to be a part of the solution going forward. And then there's going to be some tough decisions that are made. And some guys that are term left on their contract, but it's probably the appropriate time to move on and to kind of go in a different direction. I think that you could arguably say that it doesn't matter how well they finish here, even in the next 2 or 3 weeks, this team is going to have a really tough time making the playoffs. And everyone expected them to make the playoffs. And when that happens, tough decisions are made, and guys are no longer going to be around. So, yeah, I think that that's exactly what's going to happen here in the next few weeks. And you know what? It'd be interesting to see how much collaboration happens between Steiner and Army, and how much influence that Steiner has in these decisions that are going to be made as he'll be taking over the reins in a few years.
Yeah, and it's going to be really tough here also, depending on who they're looking at showcasing. Is there an availability to do some showcasing? Because you've got a pretty deep forward core, and so you still want to be able to make sure that you're going to be competitive here on the ice. But depending on how that ice time here is going to lay out, do you start to say, okay, Justin Falk, we're going to give you some more ice time? Like you said, are you going to be the part of the solution here or part of the problem? But they also want to see what some of these, expiring contracts are going to look like. I don't know what you can be able to necessarily say, go out Ryan Suter and show me more at 40 years old. I don't think that's going to happen here for the guy. But you may want to see a few more starts from Joel Hofer. What has he got? Because you've got Colton Ellis, who's down in the AHL, who's knocking on the doorstep here sooner than later, as the Thunderbirds here are pushing for a postseason spot. So it's going to be a very interesting week going up against a couple of tough opponents.
And this is kind of a hard question, I'm sure, to answer. But Jamal, I just kind of want to touch on something that you mentioned there with Jim Montgomery. And I'm sure that have a close relationship with him. I just wanted to see what you thought about what you think the team identity would be with Jim Montgomery. Like, what is kind of an ideal Jim Montgomery team with Craig Berube? Obviously, we're all familiar with, he's a forechecking coach. He wants his players to play hard, sacrifice their body. What would you describe as like the Jim Montgomery team that he could have?
Well, I think all the characteristics that he had as a player, he was a fantastic player. Probably born 25 years too early for the era that he had to come up in and play in, because I played against him in college when it was him and playing for the Maine Black Bears with Paul Correa, and he won the Hobey Baker. It was impossible to stop. And so I know he's going to want skill, but he's going to want hard skill. I know that he's going to want his players to defend and play the right way and not cheat offensively, but I also know he's going to want to value the puck. And I think that he understands that it's about the team concept. He understands that you're going to need contributions from third and fourth liners to eat up minutes. He understands that you're going to need guys to accept their roles. And he's also a fantastic communicator. So I think that he has historically gotten the most out of his teams. I think that it's fair assessment that if he doesn't get this group to the playoffs, that there is going to be and should be changes made. But I think that guys like playing for him. I think there's an honesty there to his approach that players appreciate. And I think that he's a smart, tactical guy, because I'll tell you what, the veteran guys, it doesn't matter how nice you are, how you communicate well. It's, do you make the right decisions in the right time to allow us to win? And I think he's able to do that as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking about when you're talking about the way that he was able to get the most out of the players or just really connect with them. I was thinking about when he was an assistant coach for the Blues at first under Berube, and he wore a wig one time to just kind of get the guys to like loosen up a little bit. And that was kind of like my first glimpse into Jim Montgomery and how he finds any way to just really have fun and connect with these players to get the most out of them.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that story. He's a great guy that understands. Even then, like, he wouldn't do that as a head coach, right? But
yeah,
you'll see him skate around and he'll talk to different guys, come over and have a talk with a young guy and find out what's going on with them. It could be as simple as really not talking about much, and then he might get what he needs to get in and let them know. He's just a real smart guy, the way he communicates, and it doesn't take much. I've had coaches that didn't talk to you at all. I've had coaches similar to him, but it's usually the assistant coach that will go in and give you few words of encouragement. Those few words of encouragement are like confidence boosting energy for players, and he knows how to do that at the right times.
And everybody, make sure you get your questions in, because I have one more question for these guys before I jump into any questions you might have on the chat. And make sure to like and subscribe on our YouTube channel and follow us on social media. So we have to talk about Four Nations. I know that I alluded to it earlier, but what a performance for Team USA and Canada and everybody involved, of course. But that championship game was everything that I think the NHL could have imagined to happen in that situation. What was the reaction that you guys had to it? And of course, Jordan Binnington, as we mentioned, and Colin Parayko with great performances there. Mike, I'll get your reaction first.
My immediate reaction was, I never want to see an All-Star game again. This was a tournament, I think, that could not have gone any better here for the NHL. The fact that you've got every other league around the United States saying, how do we replicate that, or how do we top this? It may have been the fact that you haven't seen best on best like this here in a decade. So that could have played a factor here in it. But I also think the factor that, not saying that these guys don't give their all or really go to try when they put on East versus West, or any other faction here of that. But when you put that country crest here on your jersey, I mean, these guys really, really give it their all. And so this was something that my kids, who I've got 3 kids, and my 4-year-old son is watching this like, Daddy, what is this? It's like, this is incredible. And I feel so bad for him because the kid can't ever play. Unfortunately, he's got one kidney, one functioning kidney. And I'm like, dude, like, let's watch this together, have some good, just daddy son time. And then my girls were loving this here as well. And so I think this was just an amazing time just to be a hockey fan. And, for anybody who wasn't a hockey fan, just to be able to tune in and just see just some of, what hockey's all about.
Absolutely. I'm a soccer dad. My daughter's 16 and 19, play soccer. My one daughter's at Kansas State playing right now as a freshman. And I had a dad on that we've been friends for years with our daughter's soccer, reached out to me, never watches hockey. And he's like, I'm watching that game on Thursday night. This is unbelievable. And I always say, when we're able to do that as a sport, get people that would never watch hockey to watch hockey, you have a home run. I will suggest this, though. We can't continue year after year after year to ask the same thing of the same best players to do it every single year. Now, selfishly, I would love I never called it a all-star break. I call it a break, because it was never I was never an all-star. I was like, where am I going on the break? There's a break coming up. So it's too much to ask these guys to do it every year, but maybe there's a balance. Maybe it's every 3 years. It would still create that animosity, that rivalry that makes our sport so great. But we cannot go as long as we just went. You could tell to go 10 years or however long, to think that we've never seen, Crosby and McDavid play together. McDavid's been in the league 10 years. That's too long. So I think they figured that part out. And as a fan of the game, I don't think I've seen faster hockey. It was unbelievable.
It was. And we had Access Rob chime in saying 9 million watched the Four Nations Championship, so probably won't see another All-Star game. Well, yeah, I think the All-Star game's still going to happen, but man, yeah, Four Nations was way better than the All-Star game. But Jamal, you mentioned there, it's very taxing, obviously, for the players. We saw Matthew Tkachuk, he barely played any minutes because he was injured going into that championship. I wonder, is this going to kind of make some teams a little bit more worried about putting their guys up for events like this? You have the Olympics coming up too.
Yeah, I think that's always the fear, right? For organizations why would I want to give up my player to play in these events when our goal, and I'm paying him 9 million a year, 10 million a year, whatever it may be. You also have the desire of the players. So it's a delicate balance. Honestly, I think it comes down to numbers. How many players are actually from those Four Nations, did not play, and how long were they out afterwards? I think that number and those number of weeks, and they're able to calculate. I think it becomes a math problem, and I really do, where they're able to say, okay, the Four Nations tournament created 3 injuries that lasted 2 weeks or longer. That was one player too long for how important that player is. I think we're under that number. It's unfortunate, obviously. I love the Tkachuk boys. I hate to see them injured, but I think that if you ask them if they're okay with it, even if Matthew is out for a couple weeks, would he do it again? His answer is going to be absolutely. So I think they all got out rather safely. It was a success. Nagging looked like a little bit of a groin injury, perhaps. That's probably at most 2 weeks. I think it was an unbelievable success that everyone, in my opinion, got out healthy, and I'll include the Kachuk boys in that description.
Yeah, it was great seeing the Kachuk brothers and their performance for Team USA. And just to close things out real quick, guys, we have to talk about the Blues' upcoming games, including the Kraken at home on Tuesday. I know that we mentioned just kind of the expectations for this team for the trade deadline, but what else are you guys looking for the Blues in these next few games going into the trade deadline, just for the players specifically? And Mike, I'll start with you.
I think it's we'll go back to that earlier definition, the consistently inconsistent, just to try and be able to put some sort of consistency here with their play. I really want to be able to see the top end guys really be able to push. But I also want to be able to see a little bit here more from Zachary Balduke. I know that this is technically speaking, like his rookie season, technically speaking, but seeing him at 12 minutes a night here right now, I want to see him really command the puck and say, this I deserve to be able to be here. Give me some power play time and be able to just really be able to earn his ice time. In the sense here is that, as I wanted to see a little more here from Dylan Holloway. He was thrust into a little bit of a higher role, I think, than necessarily he was ready for. He showed a lot in the beginning of the season, and I would really like to be able to see a lot more hear from him in this latter portion here of the season as well.
I agree with all those things. I think to get to that consistency, that would be for me the result. If they can get, I believe they haven't had a 3-game winning streak all season long. That's something they need. And I don't know when that's going to happen, if that happens now. But what is encouraging is the way that they played with pace, particularly tonight, was impressive. And how do they sustain that? Without hesitancy, without question. When Neighbors got that breakaway, yes, he got caught. That shot was blocked. That should be your mentality. Take off. Assume that's going to get blocked. That's why he got that opportunity. That's playing on your toes. That's playing fast. And I think that if they're able to continue to activate their D, continue to lead the charge in regard to Parayko's play, and I think that fed into Falk's aggressiveness offensively. He was like, yeah, I could do that too. So I think if they keep that mentality, it's going to help allow them to play quicker. And when they're playing quicker, they're tough to play. And when you are rolling 4 lines like they can, that's a really difficult lineup to play against. And I think you're going to see the best of this group, because all that chatter, those guys that want to stick around are going to end up playing their best hockey down the stretch.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us, Jamal and Mike. It's wonderful talking to you two, and looking forward to you guys and this conversation every single week. And I promise you, next week, every single week, I'm going to try to work on my background, because you guys have killed me on the backgrounds for our Zoom today. I need to work on it. I mean, both of you guys have great backgrounds. I quickly had my husband put up bobbleheads that we just moved into this house. So this is my excuse that I'm going to drag out for a little bit. And so I need to work on my kind of basement setup, but I love the backgrounds that you guys have.
No judging here, Brooke. You take your time. I think it looks great. So you've got a lot more going on than I do right now, but this has been fun. I'm excited about this year.
Yeah. Thank you so much too, Mike, for joining us.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's been so much fun. Jamal, absolute pleasure here. Absolute pleasure.
Great. Thank you guys so much for joining us. That was Jamal and Mike, and we will talk every single week for our Blues Hub Weekly right here at 7:30. And thank you all for watching and listening. And by the way, we do have an event coming up this week, and it is our kickoff party. We would love to have you guys out there this Thursday night. Be sure to join us for Sports Hub SEL kickoff party at the Hot Shots on Lindbergh and Limay. Come meet the team and enjoy great food and drink specials. The party starts at 6 as the Blues game starts at Washington. We'll watch the game, have great prize giveaways, and the Blues Hub postgame show will broadcast live after the game. Also, 2 lucky Blues fans that night and a few of their friends will win their very first Sports Hub STL St. Louis sports experience, which will include watching a Blues road game at a private party with Blues alum. That is really cool. Sports Hub STL staff and more. Want a chance to win? Come out to Sports Hub STL kickoff party this Thursday night at the new Hot Shots on Lindbergh and Limay. Hot Shots, St. Louis's home for all game. all the time since 1990. Find yours at hotshotsnet.com. And thank you all for watching and listening tonight. We really appreciate it. We'll be doing this every single week, as I mentioned, at 7:30 right here on this YouTube page. So make sure you like and subscribe. And by the way, I will see you guys tomorrow morning on the Rainy Character Show. But for tonight, thank you all for watching here for our Blues Hub postgame show and Blues Hub weekly show. And we will see you all next week.
Oh!